So here is my A3 painting. I have traced all the objects, so they're all ready to paint. The first place I suggest you always start painting is the background. So, as you can see in my photograph here, it's solid kind of dark bluey black here. There are some range of tones here that are darker and lighter here, and then at the bottom it's very dark down here as well. So that's where I'm going to start. That's going to be my first task, is to start blocking in the larger areas of background. Now, when I'm blocking it in, I'm going to start off with the top right hand side here, which is part here. Now that's all very, very dark and there's no ranges of tone in that. So I'm going to block that in first. Then I'm going to block this in a slightly lighter tone, and then I'll put the darker tones into it as well. So I'm going to just move my picture into position where you can see what I'm doing. Now the gouache paints, what you can do is you can put them out into a small plate. I am going to use, I suggest that you don't use black. Never use pure black or large blocks of black. You can maybe use tiny amounts of black to make your colours a bit darker, but never use it as a big solid shape. So I'm going to use the darkest blue, which is called Prussian blue, and I'm going to just put a small amount of that out. And I'm going to use the brown, which is the burnt sienna, so I'm going to put that out as well. And I will also put out a small amount of, just get this in, that's it. And I will put out a small amount of white as well. Now, we don't have a lot of paint in these tubes, and I'm afraid this is all we've got, so you need to be careful and try and use your paint sparingly. You can always put more paint out, but you can't get it back into the tubes. So try to be careful with the amount of paint that you're putting out if you can, okay? So small amounts of paint to begin with. Now, gouache paints are kind of an in-between watercolours and acrylics. They are more opaque than watercolours, if you know what I mean by that. I mean, you can create a more solid tone with the colours rather than like with watercolours, which are a bit more transparent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start blocking this area in here. So I'm just looking at that section here, and I'm going to start. I'm going to use, you've got two fairly big brushes here, like these ones. I think I'm going to start with the bigger brush, this one here. I'm going to add a wee bit of water. Make sure you also have yourself a bit of kitchen towel or tissue paper or something as well to be able to dry your brush off when you need to. So I'm going to mix the brown and mix the dark blue together. To see what kind of tone I get with that shade and tone of dark tone that I get. There we go. And I'm going to start blocking this in, just like the painting. Now it looks more bluey at the moment, but I'm going to block it in. I can use a bit of water to try and spread my paint out. And it's really dark right in that top right hand corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to get the black, but just a tiny touch of the black, which I'm going to put onto my palette. Just a small amount, not too much. We're not allowed to use big areas which have got pure black in them, and use just pure black paint. And the other thing you want to always make sure as well is that you don't use pure colours. Try not to use pure colours when you're painting. So don't just take something out of a tube and put it directly onto the paper. Think about adding maybe mixing it with another colour. Okay, so there, I'm doing that now, and then I'm going to add a bit of water, not too much, a wee bit of water, and I'm going to get it to blend with my bluey brown tone so it doesn't go completely black. There we go. That's it. So a bit of water, didn't use too much, to blend it in. There we go. And that is that top corner. Not finished, but certainly the first layer of it done. Then I'm going to do the other side. So like I showed you here, we've obviously got a dark bit there. I've got another dark bit here, and it's another dark bit there. And then these tones here are a wee bit lighter. So what I'm going to do is put a bit of my tissue paper underneath the paper so that it can come off the side of the paper without worrying that I'm going to get paint on my desk. I'm going to mix my blue and my brown again together, but this time I'm going to add a tiny amount of white with it because I want to make it that lighter tone, this lighter tone that's in that edge bit there. And I'm going to block it in all the lighter tone, and then I'm going to put the darker tone on top. It's always better to start lighter and then gradually get darker. So I'm going to block this in, add a wee bit of water to my brush, and block it in. Best to keep your brush strokes going in all of the same direction as much as you possibly can, so that it looks neat and tidy. Won't be possible all the time, but as much as you can. So I'm keeping my brush strokes going up and down, up and down. And I'm not going to worry about the small bits of leaves and plants that are kicking over into this area here. I'm just going to paint over them because I'll be able to draw and paint on top of them at a later date. And that's the beauty about the gouache, that if you paint quite a dark colour, you can paint lighter tones on top of it and they come out. Actually, you can do that. So get this blocked in. And take it all the way down the side here. Tiny amount of black, and that's in here. I've got a big bit here that comes all the way down. Get that in. Got another one here. Hopefully the light is bright enough in the room for you to be able to see this, like that. And then there's a kind of third one and maybe a tiny smaller one as well. So there's back a bit here. There we go. And then a tiny amount up here as well. Now there is a sort of texture to this drapery as well, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you later how I can do the texture on that. I'm going to leave it at the moment. I'm going to wipe my brush, cleaning my brush out with the water, and I'm going to try and take as much water out of it as I can, dab it on my tissue, and I'm going to blend these darker bits in. But I'm only using small amounts of water. There we go. And that's just your first layer. We're going to go back to this and we're going to do more to it. So I have waited a few minutes, a wee while, to get the paint to dry. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and build up some of the tones and make them a wee bit stronger, some of the darker and lighter tones. And also in this area here, you can see on this left hand side that my drapery looks quite velour-like, and it's got all these kind of patches of darker tones in it, which is how I'm going to create that by doing a technique called stippling. So first of all, I have I'm going to use my same brushes that I was using, and I'm going to build up some of the darker tones. So I'm going to mix a tiny amount of black with the brown and the blue that I'd already made. I'll bring it over here so you can see it. And I'm going to paint up in the top corner here and just make some of these tones a bit darker. What you'll notice with gouache paint, the second layer that you put on, if you mix water with it, then underneath that will start to mix with the top layer that you're doing, because gouache paints are water based, so like watercolours, you can mix your tones from below your lower layers in the same way. If it was acrylic, it would be completely dry and it wouldn't mix, but with gouache paints it does mix. So you can see some of my tones are sort of changing here a wee bit, and I'm just making it really, really dark in the top with the black, the brown and the Prussian blue, just to make it really, really much darker. What you'll find is when you start doing the background, this is the boring part of the painting. It's the part that when you're looking at it, it doesn't look like you're making much progress. It takes a wee while to get going. When you paint your first object, trust me, when you start painting your first object, that's when you'll start to really enjoy your still life. But if we go in this way and paint the background first, you'll make your life an awful lot easier when you work through if you just need to be patient. If you're patient now, it will pay off. It will definitely pay off when you start painting your objects, because then you won't have to be going around the background and trying to paint the background in around your objects. And my advice as well is, for your background, if it's big areas, easier if you use a big paintbrush as well. Use a bigger paintbrush, because your detail is all going to be in your objects. You want your objects to ping out, to pop out, so your background's not going to have the same amount of detail as your background is going to. Your objects are going to have lots more detail than your background to make them stand out. Okay, so I'm going to use dry paintbrushes. This is one of my other dry paintbrushes, and I'm going to use a technique called stippling, where I'm just going to press the tip of the paintbrush into the paint, and I mix it with all my three colours that I'm using, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it onto the fabric and try and create this velour effect that's being created, or that you can see in the photograph. So that is the first stage of blocking in your background. So any of the stronger blocked in areas, you work on those first. So Try to make it as loose as you can. Use your large paintbrushes, get your dark and light areas in. Don't worry about detail, because detail is going to be focused on the objects to make them stand out.